Innately, we know that our organizational development costs are extremely small relative to the full cycle project economics that invariably our industry encounters. But in reality, how do you really begin to show this? How do you quantify that? In the final module of our three-part series, Value and Competency Development, we take a look at the opportunity to quantify the full cycle project economics and look at that full cycle economic impact and the benefit of your competency development investments. Enjoy these remarks by Petroskill CEO Ward Brett.
So here we are onto the third way to value investing in people or value developing skills. And this is to look at the value of a competent organization on full cycle project economics. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to compare full cycle project economics of a fully competent versus an average performance organization. And the way you do this is with three ways. First, you bound the impact of a competent execution on a project's cost, quality, and schedule trade-off. So basically, you're going to say, how do people with the right skills, affect what the organization does on the good, cheap, and fast trade-off? And then you can estimate, you calculate if you can, but probably estimating how proper skills historically affect this. Then you estimate the cost to develop and acquire competent people. And so in other words, what's it going to cost to make sure we have the right capable people? And then you use incremental economics to bound the effect of this. And the bottom line of this thing is that since our human development costs are so low compared to our large project capital cost, the return on investment in even modestly productive performance management is very huge. And so we basically underinvest in competent people. So we use this full cycle valuation approach on all of the projects. We do big projects. We come up with cash flows versus time. We look at variable rates of payback, what's going to happen in under different effects of product prices and so forth. And somebody in our company looks at this and go, I think we should make the investment. The idea is let's use the same kind of thinking to value organizational capability and value how important organizational capability is in our business. And so this is the way you use full cycle economics to value competent staff or organizational capabilities. Our projects have some cash flow versus time. We invest in a project and drilling the wells, building the facility, takes a certain amount of time to do that. We have a positive return, expect a positive return, doing whatever we're doing, producing oil and gas, processing oil and gas, producing chemicals, et cetera, for some period of time. And based on that, say the investment's worth it or not. And so basically what we're looking at is the schedule, the cost, and the quality being the productive life versus time, cost being what the investment is, schedule being how long does all this take versus time. And that's how we determine if an investment is worth it. We quantify improvement by saying what would happen if we had less investment, shorter time, higher return, increased productive life. Basically, what if we trade off good, cheap, and fast to understand the economics of this and come up with an incremental cash flow to understand if doing something faster or better is going to be worth the money, and incremental cash flow analysis helps us to understand that. We're going to use the same kind of idea to understand the value of organizational capabilities. So in this particular case, we're going to look at some other cases here in a second. We have an $800 million Deepwater development that takes several years to get going, produces $200 million a year in return for a period of time, and then starts declining. And the return, net present value of this at 12% discount rate is $1 billion. 200% return, discounted return on investment. And people will have, FID estimates of something like this, and very often they underperform. And in reality, in this case, what happens if the project takes 10% longer? Well, if the project takes 10% longer, so instead of going cash flow positive at 4 years, it goes cash flow positive at 4.4 years. Some delays. What causes these delays? Well, human capability, organizational capability, scheduling delays, improper estimates, number of things, people errors, misunderstanding what reality is, makes the project take 10% longer. Well, the return on this project goes from 220% to 213%. That's good, still a good project, but that delay cost $81 million. So if we could have spent up to $80 million reducing that delay and still made money if we'd been certain that would have worked out. What happens if the costs go up? It doesn't cost $800 million, it costs $880 million. In that particular case, the project's going to go from 220% return to 160%. Still a good project, but that increased cost has reduced the net present value of this project by $278 million. So it's a significant amount of money. What happens if we reduce the revenue of the project? Performance doesn't come in like we think. Wells aren't quite as productive, more downtime in the facilities, etc. We still have a decent project. Hey, this is good money, 100% return. Who's going to argue about 100% return? But we've just left $500 million on the table. And so in cases, what causes these things to happen? Well, what causes something to take longer, have more cycle time, not be as productive? And it's organizational capabilities, people, humans making choices that affect these things. What would happen if we were better? We reduce the cycle time by 10%. We reduce the cost by 10%. We increase the productivity by 10%. This project would go from 220% return on investment to 368% return on investment. We would have made $600 million to do that. So this is the incremental economics. What if we had spent, and if we could do something 10% faster, 10% cheaper, 10% lower cost by just typing it in, we would do it. But you can't do that. You actually have to cause things to happen. What if we'd spend $1 million a year fixing the competency system in this project to make sure we had the right people with the right skills at the right time, and spent up to $200 million a year, $2 million a year maintaining that program? The return on that investment would be 4,000%. So this demonstrates the impact of the leverage you have by increasing organizational capabilities, because small changes in the performance of our projects, 10% may not be small, but even still, small changes in the performance of our projects have a large dollar number of value, and small changes in investments in organizational capability can cause those to happen. So looking at how these compare for different projects, we have a Deepwater project, a midstream project, a recompletion project, and have demonstrated the sensitivity of project cycle time, capital costs, revenue, and asset life to the project return on investment. And basically, what normally happens in these circumstances is 20% returns in capital costs or revenue can double project return. You can take a project that whatever the return was and change capital costs and revenue by 20%, and you'll double the return on investment of the project. 20% reductions can make a project return to go to zero. So capital costs 20% higher than we thought. Dang, project's going to zero now. Normally, capital costs and revenue are about as important to each other, but not always. Cycle time may be significant, but sometimes it's not significant. Sometimes it is significant in terms of return on project investment. And depending upon the situation, a 20% change in asset life might not move the needle very much because it happens so far in the future. There's caution, though, in using this analysis, because cost is not necessarily a function of time. Sometimes it is a function of time. So if you reduce time, you'll reduce the cost, but other times it's not. But this begins to help us to understand what's the most important thing and how does human capability or organizational capability or the skills our people have affect project economics. So the third approach here is to look at the full cycle project economics and use that to understand how organizational capability affects the projects that we have, and be able to understand the effect of development activities on the outcome of our projects. And the bottom line on this is because the return on investment of our because the costs of our projects are so large, and relatively small investments in human capabilities can have significant impacts on cycle time, cost, and revenue. It's easy to underinvest in competent people.